Here we have Mertensia virginica, or Virginia bluebells. What we're going to be looking at today is what Mertensia virginica looks like in every season of the year. We're going to be focusing on established plants and established patches of plants, but in all of this video you will get to see also what first and second year growth of Virginia bluebells looks like. So I have up on the screen now some information about Mertensia virginica so we can make sure we're talking about the same plant. And while you're looking at that, I will point out just a couple things to you, which is Mertensia virginica likes moist, well-drained soil. So you often find them in moist woodlands, along creeks or streams, in floodplains. I mean, these ones you're looking at here are along a creek. That's very common. Now, if you don't have a creek or moist woodlands in your yard, that's okay. You can still grow Virginia bluebells just fine. You just need to make sure that it's not in a spot that dries out too much, right? So the last thing I will point out to you here is that Virginia bluebells are considered spring ephemeral flowers. So ephemeral in the general sense is something that lasts for a really short time, right? And in the plant world, that means a plant that has a short life cycle, or in this case, a short period of active growth. So a spring ephemeral would be a plant that comes up in the spring, and by the time you get to summer, it's just completely gone. There's no stalks left over or anything. It's almost like it was never there. So up on the screen now, I have for you the two locations that we're going to look at today. One of them is all the video you've been looking at so far, and that is this semi-maintained park/hiking area. As you can see, there's a little creek in there. The soil is very moist. There's loam and clay soil both, and it's partial sunlight. The other location that we'll be looking at a little bit less, but you'll see some there, is a person's yard, and it's mostly shady. And their soil is loam because they've added a lot of soil, so they've made it loam. And it's pretty well maintained. They use mulch, and they're always weeding and everything in there. All right, so here we go. So this here is Mertensia virginica coming up when it does, which is either early spring or mid-spring. So I have early spring written there because that is when it usually will come up for me. And then for me, that will be early March. Although I have noted over the years that Virginia bluebells can come up anywhere between early or mid-spring, which for me would be March or April. It can be off by several weeks, depending on the year and how warm it is. And so as they're coming up here, these are only an inch or two tall at this point, you will notice that they have this purplish color, right? This purplish brownish color as they come up. So the reason I gave you this clip first is because this is pretty standard how they look like here when they come up. And some of them you can see are already starting to turn green, which is of course the color that those leaves will stay. So they come up purple, quickly turn to green. They have an oval-shaped leaf. And so for some of this early, just coming up video, you can't really make out yet that the leaves will be oval-shaped. But they do become oval-shaped. They're smooth. The stalk is smooth, so these are not hairy plants. And here you can see one. This is the same day as that last video. This one's just a little taller, it's a little more green, and those leaves are already a little oval-shaped. And now I'm pulling back this leaf a little bit. Look at that. So there's already flower buds in there, and this is not uncommon at all. When Mertensia virginica comes up, sometimes it's just leaves for a while. And it's even a couple weeks and there doesn't appear like there's any buds in there. And other ones that come up, those buds are in there like right away. So there's a bit of variability, which I think is sort of nice. And so something else I'll point out here, you see all these leaves that I'm like brushing out of the way? So Virginia bluebells, they like leaf litter. And so if this is your yard, when the leaves come down in the fall, you'll just want to let them stay. Leaf litter holds in moisture, kind of like a natural mulch. And Virginia bluebells, like we already said, they like moisture. Also, leaf litter slowly slowly, degrades, and when it degrades, it supplies nutrients to the soil below and to the plants that are growing there. So it's sort of a natural mulch and a natural fertilizer. And the last thing is, all these leaves provide habitat for insects, for our little pollinators. They lay eggs in there. They use the leaves to protect them as like cover from something that might want to eat them or from the weather. And so you do want to leave the leaves there, and don't shred them. If you shred them, you might be shredding butterfly or moth eggs, insect larvae. So you just let them be. Let them fall and let it be. So here is another example of, you can see the little buds of flowers in there, but you can still see some purple to some of these leaves here, and some of them, of course, are already green too. So like I said, as they come up here in early spring, for me, early March, there is variability in what they look like as they come up. And so maybe where you live, early spring or mid-spring is not March and April. Maybe it's a little bit later or a little bit sooner. So what is it for you? That is when they're going to come up. My nail polish is green because I was preparing for St. Patrick's Day. So I've got you zoomed out here, and I'm going to zoom in. And I do that just to help you get perspective on how well Virginia bluebells blend in when they start coming up. But now you're getting an eye for it, right? So this one is neat. The little ones in front there are super tiny, and then there's a couple taller leaves in the back that shot up. So that's neat. Virginia bluebells come up usually after the danger of hard frost has passed. So they don't want to come up and get snowed on or sit in the frost. However, they are native to North America. They're native to many areas that will have frost. And sometimes plants make mistakes and they come up too early. But if they're native plants, they're not idiots. They can handle it, or they can handle it a couple times. So somewhere in here, you're going to see some frost and some snow, and the bluebells do just fine. So don't worry if they come up and then the Weather Channel tells you it's going to be frost. Don't worry. They'll be all right. So here it's still early spring. There's my mitten. It was very cold that day. But now it's mid-March for me instead of early March. And you can see it's a couple weeks later, and this is still a pretty short plant. So I took my mitten off, which I did regret. So you can see all these little guys coming up. Hello, little fellas. I will say, Virginia bluebells have a tap root, so kind of one strong central root, and they do have other little roots too, and little fibrous roots that are much smaller. Their root system, though, and that tap root is very sensitive. And so which won't matter to you at all unless you want to move your Virginia bluebells. If you want to transplant them, and so whether this is a seedling, like a brand new little fella, or an established plant, if you want to move them, right now, what you're looking at, this is not the time. If you move them when they're green and growing and happy, you're going to lose probably about half of them. So they're really sensitive. They don't like to be moved when they're actively growing. And so you have to wait until they're all done growing and their whole season's over and they're about to go dormant or they're entering dormancy. And I'll point out for you when that is. That would be the time to transplant them or move them, whether that's an established plant or a little seedling. So there's some flower buds again, and you can see these ones are pushed up a little bit more than the other ones you've seen. And this is because we're a little later in time, so they're starting to pop out a little bit more. But they're still quite tiny and light purple, dark purplish, like that. Here's the one with frost. Can you tell there's frost? There was frost. It's the kind of time when you're walking and you're hearing the crunch underneath you. Crunch, crunch, crunch of the frost. But anyways, here they are in frost, and they're fine. And this plant continues to be fine. It doesn't like die tomorrow or anything. Okay, so I'm just trying to show you here what they look like as they come out of the ground too, like where the stem meets the ground. Green, again, hairless, not woody. A lot of native plants at the end of summer, the stalks that hold them up are woody. So I'm thinking of like black-eyed Susans or purple coneflower, milkweeds, goldenrod. Those stalks get woody, which has its own purpose. But Virginia bluebells don't do that. They don't get that woody stalk. So there are some flowers already starting to hang down there like that, right? And so those will, I think I was wearing mittens. Did you see that? I was just wearing mittens. So it feels a little early to be putting this bud down like it's going to flower, but that's what it's doing. And so some of these leaves in here are still even that purplish color. And so this can go on if you have a very big patch of Virginia bluebells. There can be a few weeks or a couple weeks where they're coming up. There's a little tiny one where they're coming up. Some of them are already, like you just saw, starting to make buds. Those buds are even starting to dangle over. And then in this case, some of them are still real tiny and purplish, right? And so again, this is still mid-March. So you got to see early March, and this is still mid-March, and there's such variability in where they are. These ones are all green already, right? There's no purplish leaves left. And these flower buds are much more obvious to see, right? Of note, rabbits and deer do not really like Virginia bluebells, so you don't have to worry about them getting eaten, which is great, which is another reason why this is great. Like, don't plant tulips, plant Virginia bluebells. Tulips, man, you're always fighting with the deer. They eat them, and then, what is it, squirrels? Who digs them up and eats the bulb? I mean, it's just so annoying, right? With Virginia bluebells, a patch of Virginia bluebells will come back for years and years. They're a very long-lived perennial, so you don't have to keep buying bulbs or anything, and you don't have to fight with the rabbits or the deer about it. They tend to leave it alone, which is great. And the other thing is, if you have black walnut trees, Virginia bluebells will grow under a black walnut tree. Now, if you don't know what I'm talking about, don't worry about it. But if you have black walnut trees, you know what I'm talking about. Okay, so I just pulled back and you saw all those little buds, and they are like dark purple, light purple. There's even sort of a purplish pink. Is that magenta? Well, whatever. Oh, look, one's already blooming. Can you believe this? I feel like that one might have gone a little early, but that's all right. It's all right. Anyways, all that difference in color, I'm going to talk about that in a minute. Okay, so here now, still early spring, but now we're in late March for me. So this is maybe 2 weeks again since what you just saw. Now this is a totally different location. This is several cities over, or towns over, like the next county, whatever. Anyways, you can see these ones are all a little bit shorter. This area here is a lot more windblown, and it's not quite as moist, although you do see a lot of leaf litter there, which is great for these bluebells, which is why there's a patch of them here. But it's a lot more windblown. These ones all tend to be a little bit shorter than the height that bluebells often get, which is like maybe 1.5 feet, right? But look at that. Look at all those. This is going to be amazing when they all bloom, right? All that green is the, and there again, still, we're several towns over. Look at all of that green. That's all bluebells. What a respite for your eyes after winter is over, right? You come down a hiking trail or you look in your yard. Something green's coming up. Look at them all. So Virginia bluebells, when the flowers are bloomed and opened, they tend to be that purple to blue color. We'll talk about that more in just a minute. There is a rare pink, and there is a rare white. Now, those are naturally occurring. Humans did not make them. We like to tinker with plants. We did not tinker. There just are some naturally rare pink and white versions. And so in that image you just saw of all of them in that forested area, in a forested area that's that big, although the pink and the white are rare, you probably will get one or both of them in an area that's that big. So if you have like half an acre or an acre of Virginia bluebells, you should be able to get the white form or the pink form in there, just naturally occurring. No tinkering involved. Okay, so for all of these that you've been seeing here, we're still several towns over. And I've got my little arm warmers on because it was still pretty cold in late March. All right, so we've flipped now to mid-spring, early April. I believe we're in that person's yard now, so mostly shade and maintained, which is why there's a little bit less leaves on the ground. They leave some of their leaves, I know, but they use the old leaf blower, so they don't get all the leaves that they should. But you can see here the buds in there. And here you can see the big bunches, but you see in between how there's like 2 leaves coming out of the ground, or down in here, these little like single leaves coming up. Look at that little guy. Hi, fellow. That is your first and second year growth. So this person's yard, they have a lot of first and second year growth. They've been developing this patch. And what you're looking at, this is actually from a couple years ago. I have since been to this person's yard, and this patch of bluebells is much bigger now. But those little tiny guys were the first and second year growth, because Mertensia virginica takes, from seed, it'll be about 3 years before you get a flowering plant. And so for 1 or 2 years, they're developing that very sensitive taproot. They're getting their root system going so that they can be a really long-lived perennial and be very stable. So it takes them a year or 2 to get their roots all settled up. And then in year 3, you start to get a little bit of flowering. And then in year 4 and 5, things really get amazing. So still early April. I thought these ones were neat that I saw because they had so much greenery, leaves getting very big in there, not yet a lot of blooms. Okay, and so now on all of these, without me pulling back leaves, you can start to see the buds just on your own. You can look and go, oh, there's some purple buds. And so that is where we are. And almost entirely, all the leaves are green now. I don't really see any of that purplish leaves anymore. And these buds being seeable now from far away, I guess visible would be the word, not seeable. And there's a couple that have opened. They start to form, what would it be called? An arch. The stem at the top of Virginia bluebells notably forms a little arch, or a nodding cyme. So a cyme of flowers. So in this case, this would be like the stem comes up and around at the top there. And then you have all these individual flowers. It's like a loose cluster of flowers that dangle down individually. So that'll be our nodding cyme of flowers. Except this little guy. I'm pointing this out to you because this late in the season, look how short. This is like 2 inches tall. Already has flowers. This is probably in its 3rd year. I would say this is not located in a place where it's very happy, if plants have feelings. But it's still growing and it's still trying, right? And so if your location for Virginia bluebells isn't perfect, you can still get something happening. They work very hard. Native plants are pretty good at making do with what we give them. And so on these buds here, and look at all these colors in there. Holy guacamole. You can start to see that nodding cyme of flowers. So all the individual flowers sort of dangling over on the end here. Maybe, so we're in mid-April now. Sorry, we're in mid-April. And so some flowers have already opened, but we have a lot of buds. And this is probably a stupendous time to talk about the color of these flowers, right? So in Virginia bluebells, there is a molecule that is giving them their color. I know I said molecule. You're like, are we in for a chemistry lesson? Yes, but only mildly. I did not click on this video to talk chemistry, girl. So this molecule, they're called anthocyanins. So an anthocyanin is what gives the bluebells their color. Now, most pigments in a plant, like an orange pigment, will make that flower or leaf orange, beginning and end of story. That's all that pigment can do. Oh, look, some of them are opening. Oh! So Get very excited. Okay, back to those anthocyanins. And so, but anthocyanins are cool because it isn't just this pigment makes this color, end of story. They're color changing. That's right, anthocyanins change color. Pause. So mid-spring, mid-April, you're getting a lot blooming now. So we're starting to lose buds and we're starting to bloom. And this is the awesome time. Well, anyways, when Virginia bluebells have little flower buds, that anthocyanin molecule, inside those petals, it's acidic. And when the anthocyanins are acidic, they are a pinkish color. And then over time, as they start to bloom, move from buds into blooming, inside that petal becomes more basic. So we're talking pH, people. And when it becomes more basic, that anthocyanin becomes deprotonated. I'm going to quiz you on that. And when that happens, it color changes to blue, or the wavelengths of light that are absorbed and reflected change, blah, blah, blah. But anyways, it shifts. That one molecule shifts from pink to purple to blue. So that's super cool and unique. I mean, a lot of plants have anthocyanins in their leaves, in their fruit, in their flower petals. But it's a very unique and cool molecule to make color in a plant because it isn't just a one color thing. It changes color. One molecule changing color based on whether it's acidic or basic in there. So that's super cool. And that's why you get such a variation in these colors here, right? And now, of course, as you can see, this is that person's yard that is maintained, and it's snowing. So it is, in fact, mid-April, and it snowed. A little late in the season for a snow, but it happened because that's just the planet. That's what happens. And you will see all of these bluebells will be fine. So they like to come up when snow and frost are done. But if it happens, they can handle it. They're going to be okay. This is why we love native plants. They know how to live here. So the flowers, as they bloom, they have either a very light fragrance, people say, or no smell at all. And when I get my nose up in there, I don't smell anything at all. So very light or no fragrance to us. So I've given you this faraway view because, I mean, imagine you're hiking or you're taking a walk in your neighborhood and then boom, over the horizon. Look at all those blue flowers. So it's so pretty. It's so pretty. Anyway, so this is what, when a whole patch of them are blooming at the same time, this is what you get. Don't tell me that tulips or daffodils are more spectacular than that. You can't tell. You can't tell it to me. Don't even try. Don't even try. Anyway, so we're still mid-April here, mid-spring. And as you can see here, we've got some rain. This was a rainy day. They handle snow. They handle rain. The flowers here, towards the base of the flower, where the flower is attached to the plant, it's somewhat tubular. And then towards the top of the flower, it's more bell-shaped. Hence, of course, Virginia bluebells. And so that tubular shape, and then it comes out into that sort of bell. That bell is actually five petals that are sort of fused together. So that's kind of neat. There's really nothing you can do with that information, but just go, oh, cool, fused petals. And so now you can see the base here. The the leaves at the bottom, they call those basal leaves. Those basal leaves at the bottom start to get really fat and big, don't they? Now, not on every plant, so I happen to go to this plant right now where the basal leaves aren't quite as big, but they can get up to 7 or 8 inches long, those leaves at the bottom. So they are really sucking up as much sunlight as they can before all the trees above them start to get their leaves. So they want to photosynthesize, get all the energy they can, pull it all down to their roots, put it into their flowers and nectar and pollen before everything above them gets leaves and blocks out the sun, right? Oh my gosh, they're just so pretty. And it's so interesting how sometimes to me they just look purple. I don't see blue at all. And then other times you're like, oh yeah, they are blue. Anthocyanins at work, right? So who pollinates Virginia bluebells, right? I'll tell you. Let me tell you. So you get lots of different kinds of bees. So honeybees, which I know honeybees are not native, but whatever. Honeybees, bumblebees, mason bees, anthophorid bees, and then other insects too. So you can get, there's a fly, moths, butterflies, skippers. There is even the ruby-throated hummingbird can come and pollinate sometimes. So that's nice. Now, in these groups of flowers, I do want you to be noticing sometimes you still see buds. And then mostly we have full flowers. And then in some cases, you're starting to see some of those full flowers have already fallen off too. So you get a lot of like bud, flower, post-flowering all at the same time, which I think looks neat. And you can tell when you're getting the post-flowering, like the petals have fallen off. It's when you look at the top and you see that little spike sticking out. That is, the petals are gone. So this is the rare pink form. Hello. So this area has tons and tons of Virginia bluebells. And so although rare, in an area that has a lot, you will find a rare form or two. So isn't that cool? And I have not been able to find out chemically at the molecular level what's happening in there. Is there a weird anthocyanin thing happening? Why are they pink? And here we have, also in this area, I found the rare white form. Now, not that one, this one. That's white. How cool is that? Super cool, native flower power. I know, it is super cool. So that's neat. Can I talk just another moment about our pollinators? Yes, please do. Okay, thanks. So this is cool. Virginia bluebells is one of the first handful of flowers that we first started really noting nectar robbery. Nectar robbery? My God, what happens? Let me tell you, this is so funny. So bumblebees are one of the only pollinators that can actually shove their way all the way into that tube. So bumblebees, and it takes a lot of work, and bumblebees, oh, here's one. Can you see them? Bumblebees don't actually have a lot of stored energy. So they need to get nectar to be able to move from one plant to the next. And if there's no nectar, they're in a peck of trouble, which is one reason non-native plants are bad for our pollinators, is that they sometimes don't have the nectar that our pollinators need. So our pollinators can't get from one plant to the next without dying in the middle. Anyways, so bumblebees will cram their way up that tube to get to the nectar that's at the end. And as they cram their way in there, pollen gets on their bodies. And then when they go to the next flower and cram their way up that tube, the pollen comes off and pollinates the next plant, right? But sometimes bumblebees have come up with a strategy to where they don't need to go through all that work to push their way into that floral tube there. And what they do is called nectar robbery. They go on the outside of the flower. They go to the base of the flower, so where the flower sort of attaches to the plant there, and they cut a slit into it. And they pull out the nectar. And then, oh, you can see these are starting to change. Mid-spring, late April, look at that. We're starting to lose most of our flowers now. Or they're starting to change. Anyways, those bumblebees will pull out the nectar from cutting a slit in the base of the flower there without going in. And so they're not picking up any pollen. And then they'll go to the next flower and do the same thing or whatever. And so the Virginia bluebells are not getting the pollination that they need. Do you know what I mean? And so I read, and this is a very old scientific paper, but the author was talking about looking very closely at the base of all of these different Virginia bluebells and finding some of them have as many as 3 different slits in there. Like they've been robbed multiple times by bumblebees, getting the nectar, but not taking any pollen. So that's interesting. And Virginia bluebells aren't the only ones that have this nectar robbery, but crazy, right? And so, we talk about the evolution of these Virginia bluebells with the insects and pollinators that are here in our country. And in this association, mostly those bumblebees got to go all the way up to the back of that flower, and they get pollen, just happens to get on their body, and then they go pollinate the next one. And so the Virginia bluebells make nectar to bring the bumblebees in to do this job. And so when the bumblebees do this robbery, it is robbery. They're not doing their half of their evolutionary deal, you know? I give you nectar, you take my pollen. So this is that rare pink form losing its petals at the end of the season. Okay, and so you are still seeing, of course, some flowers, but as I start to pull some of these tops towards you, you can see these little spiky guys sticking out, and those little spiky guys are telling you that the flowers are gone. And they look kind of cool. I think sometimes people think when the flower's gone, things don't look as good anymore or whatever, and I think they always look kind of cool. That long stick thing, I believe that is the style. If we're going to talk about floral parts, I believe that's the style. Now, I might be wrong, and you can tell me if I'm wrong. I don't mind. Okay, so if Virginia bluebells have been pollinated, and in a few of these clips, you'll see me trying to look inside where that style is, where the inside of the flower used to be. And what I'm looking for and trying to show you is if there's fruit in there. So it's not like an apple that's in there, but it is a kind of fruit, and it's called a schizocarp. Now I'm going to quiz you on that too. No, I'm kidding. A schizocarp is this type of fruit that when it dries up, it splits into sections. And so when you look in the middle of this, if it's been pollinated, what you'll see are 4 little green sections inside where the flower used to be. I definitely will show you a couple. And if you've had complete pollination and everything is working well in there, you should see 4 of them. Sometimes you only see 2. I've seen 3 before instead of 4. And I'm not always sure if that's they did not get totally pollinated or they did, but one of the little pieces of the fruit just didn't develop right. I'm not always sure what's going on in there. So here at the ground, you see those little guys? So that's all going to be your first year or your second year growth. And you get that again for 1 or 2 years. And then in year 3 is when you'll start to usually get your flower. And so that schizocarp fruit divides into 4 sections. And in each of those 4 sections contains inside is where you get the seeds. So you should have 4 seeds in there. And those seeds are actually called nutlets. And I like saying that. It's funny. Nutlet. Okay, so here you can see your Virginia bluebells are starting to flop over a little bit. And you can see there's no flowers on this one, right? Am I blind? No, I'm not. Yeah, there's no flowers here. And you can see all these pokey things, I think styles, sticking out. And then there, you can kind of, can I get closer? Oh, good girl. You can kind of see in there 4 little green sections. So that's that fruit dividing into 4 sections. And so if you're trying to harvest the seeds of the Virginia bluebells, you're not going to want to take them when they're green in there. You want to take them out when they turn to brown. And I don't think I have any video of them when they turn brown. There, see inside there? One of them has 3, one of them has 2. It's a single fruit, and it's just it divides into sections. So it divides into sections, and that is your schizocarp fruit. So when those turn from that lightish green to brown, that's when you can take them out and they're ready. So we're in mid-May now, late spring. And so late spring is when all this happens. You start to lose your flowers, and you start to get your little fruit formation in there, and all these plants start to flop over. And so you get maybe 3 weeks of bloom, which is nice. That's a decent amount of time. 3 weeks is nothing to sneeze at, right? And so I had said other native plants that a lot of people are familiar with, like yellow or black-eyed Susans and purple coneflower, milkweed, goldenrod, they all, oh, pause again. Late May, do you see these? it's the big leaves. Those are our Virginia bluebells really flopped over now. And so I'm going to tell you why that is. So those other native plants that a lot of people are familiar with, when they're done, they stay up as a brown stalk. And that's because at the top, they'll have a seed pod or a seed head that birds might want to eat, and the birds will come and eat the seeds. And so the plant is holding up those seeds for the birds. So here we are, early summer, early June. And you can see now our leaves are changing and everything is flopped over. You're going to want to leave those there. Don't, quote, clean this up. Don't clean it up yet. I'm telling you why. I'm getting to it. And so, and then other things like milkweed has that stalk and it holds at the top of it a seed pod, and those seeds float away on the wind. So these are ways that these plants are distributing their seeds. They hold up their seeds for the wind or for birds, but bluebells don't do that, do they? No, they don't have that woody stem. It stays green and hairless and it flops over, as you're seeing. You can see more of those little fruits in there, or fruit. And so the main distributors of seeds for Mertensia virginica are ants. And in fact, a lot of spring ephemerals, the main distributors of their seeds are ants. Now, I know you know ants can certainly climb up the stalk of a plant. For real. Oh, okay. See now, look, here we are, mid-June, early summer. I mean, so much flopping over of these plants. Anyways, and the easiest way for an ant, though, to get the seeds and the fruit out of Virginia bluebells is if they can just walk up and take it. So Virginia bluebells fall over, whomp, as part of their evolution. And this allows ants to have easier access to get the fruit out of there. And ants will take those fruits, and I think those fruits have a little fat body on them, and that fat body doesn't do anything for the bluebells, but it attracts the ants. The ants come because they want that fat, and they take it away, and with it, they take the little nutlet with it, or the little fruit with it, and off they march. So you see those, I'm circling it with my finger. The changing light green to brown, those are your bluebells there. The ants will come, and sometimes the ants will go a very far way to go back to their nest or to go back to wherever. I don't really know a lot about ants, wherever they would go. And they eat that fat body, and then they just leave the little seed or the little nutlet behind. And that is how those seeds get distributed. And so here you can see now we're in late June. I'm trying to find them, and it's a little hard at this point to even find them, right? So about this point, when I'm looking around here and not seeing it anymore, right before you get to this point, when they're all flopped over and they're fallen down and they're yellow, and to our eyes they're starting to look junky, that is the time when, see here I'm finding a little bit more. No, I'm not. I'm like, is this it? No, it's just gone, girl. This would be the time. Or right before you get to this time, if you want to transplant them, that's the time to do it. You dig them up, dig deep to make sure you get that full root, and then you can move them because at that point they are dormant. So I'm not advertising here for this company I got these seeds from, but this is to show you when the inside that fruit, you get these 4 little nutlets. These are the nutlets, which is to say the seeds. These are the seeds, and that's what they look like inside those green things. And so here we are. This video was taken in January, so winter, but this would be midsummer, fall, winter. There's no Virginia bluebells here. Where are they? Exactly. Totally underground. There's no stalks left above ground. There's no, obviously, flowers or leaves left. You would have no idea that they had ever been here. So this is me rooting around like, could this be it? No, it's not. Something I didn't mention, but there was this research paper done on I thought was interesting and maybe helpful, is To get the most seeds and to get the most pollination and to get the most visits from pollinators, because I know a lot of times when you look out your window, you like to see bumblebees floating around, moths, butterflies. Maybe you could get a ruby-throated hummingbird viewing. The way to do that is if you have 5 plants or more. So this study was looking at when do you start getting, what did they call it? High insect visitation. So when are you getting the most pollinators coming to your Virginia bluebells? And that is when you have a patch of bluebells that are 5 plants or more. So it can be as many as you want, but once you get to 5 plants that are flowering, you'll get the most optimal pollination between plants. That cross-pollination between plants is where you really get the most seeds and fruit being made. And so 5+ plants, you'll get the most insects, the most bumblebees. If you only can get 1 or 2 to grow, or you only have room for 1 or 2, that doesn't mean, oh, well, I won't get high insect visitation and pollination won't be optimal. That might be true, but you still will get pollinators coming. There still will be pollination. You still will get seeds made that the ants can use, and you'll still get a little something happening. It just won't become ideal until you get to 5. And so, you do what you can, right? And so, of course, here we are back to just our blooming footage. And that is what Mertensia virginica looks like in every season of the year. Most seasons, of course, it's dormant, it's underground, and there's not really anything to see. But during spring, for this spring ephemeral, you do get this beautiful show. And even if you don't get 5 plants, but you can only get 1 or 2 to grow, we're still building little mini ecosystems in our yards. And we're supporting our ants, our pollinators, our birds, all the other insects that I don't know anything about. We're creating little mini ecosystems. Plant native, my lovelies.